Have you ever stood upon a high, desolate moor as twilight bleeds across the heather, and felt a sorrow that was not your own? Have you ever heard, beneath the whistle of the wind through a standing stone, a faint, keening whisper that seems to rise from the very soil beneath your feet? These are not mere tricks of the ear, nor phantoms of an overactive imagination. They are echoes, imprinted upon the landscape by centuries of profound grief, the lingering lamentations of those who cannot rest. They are the Whispering Moors and the Crying Maidens of the British Isles, spectral fixtures as ancient and as enduring as the granite tors and chalk cliffs they haunt. It is my contention that these legends are far more than simple ghost stories. They represent a form of ancestral memory, a collective archive of sorrow, injustice, and longing, etched not in vellum, but into the very geography of our world. Each tale of a spectral maiden is a psychic scar upon the land, a warning and a memorial that speaks a truth deeper than history, a truth felt in the bones when the mist descends and the world shrinks to the circle of a flickering lantern. I am your guide through these shadow-shrouded realms, and together we shall explore the histories and meanings of these timeless sorrows. Our journey is not one of mere observation, but of participation. We are not tourists in the land of the dead. We are students of its oldest and most persistent lessons. We will venture into the psychological landscapes these entities inhabit, to understand what they represent about our own fears of loss, our anxieties about the past, and the indomitable power of a love that defies even the finality of the grave. These are not tales spun for children's entertainment, to be dismissed with the morning light. They are collective nightmares that reveal profound truths about the human condition, and their whispers have much to teach us, if only we have the courage to listen. Tonight, we shall examine 8 of these sorrowful specters. We will travel from the mist-shrouded castles of Scotland to the treacherous meres of England, from the windswept coasts of the Northern Isles to the ancient hills of Wales. We will encounter the vengeful victim, the eternal penitent, the fey harbinger, and the guardian of a lost world. We will learn that not all ghosts are born of violence. Many, perhaps the most potent, are born of a love so powerful it refuses to be extinguished, burning like a cold, ethereal flame across the ages. If you, like me, feel drawn to the darkness not for its horrors, but for the truths it illuminates, if you believe that a story can be a key to unlocking the deeper chambers of the human soul, then I invite you to join our community of seekers. Subscribe to our channel and activate the notifications so that you are never late for our descents into the lore that shaped our world. We value discourse and contemplation here, so I ask you to consider this as we proceed. Which of these forms of eternal sorrow do you find the most profoundly disturbing, and why? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights are a vital part of our shared exploration. And now, let our journey into the heart of the Whispering Moors truly begin. First, we travel to the rugged coast of Cornwall, to the wind-lashed cliffs of Land's End, a place where the veil between worlds feels perilously thin. Here haunts the figure known as the Lady of the Land, or the Maiden of Pendeen. She is not a ghost of a specific, named individual recorded in the annals of history, but rather a composite entity, a genius loci born of countless tragedies upon these unforgiving shores. She is the embodiment of all the wives, mothers, and sweethearts who stood upon these granite ramparts, watching as the sails of their loved ones disappeared over the horizon, never to return. Her sorrow is the collective sorrow of generations, a grief so immense it has become a permanent feature of the environment. Her form is as mutable as the sea mist from which she emerges. Witnesses most often describe a slender woman, draped in gray or white garments that seem woven from the fog itself, her hair a tangle of seaweed and salt spray. Her face is seldom seen clearly, for she is always turned towards the tumultuous Atlantic, her posture one of eternal, agonizing vigilance. She possesses no overt supernatural abilities in the conventional sense. She does not hurl objects or shriek curses. Her power is more insidious, more profound. It is the power of atmosphere. To be in her presence is to be submerged in an ocean of pure, undiluted melancholy. Cheerful thoughts wither, hope recedes like the tide, and the visitor is left with an overwhelming sense of personal loss, even if their own life is untouched by tragedy. Her only weakness, if it can be called such, is the rising sun. She is a creature of twilight and storm, and the first rays of dawn dissolve her back into the anonymous mists. The origin of the Maiden of Pendeen is lost to time, for she is as old as the fishing villages and smugglers' coves that this coastline. She is born anew with every shipwreck, with every fishing boat swallowed by a sudden squall. She is the spiritual residue of every tear shed upon the cliff path, every desperate prayer whispered into the gale. She exists because the sea has always been both a source of livelihood and a vast, insatiable tomb for the people of Cornwall. She is their shared grief given form, a constant, spectral reminder of the price of living so close to the raw, untamable power of the ocean. Her legend is not a story of one woman's death, but a testament to the enduring human struggle against an indifferent and often cruel natural world. In the winter of 1881, a young land surveyor from London, a Mr. Alastair Finch, was commissioned to chart a section of the coastline near Pendeen Watch Lighthouse. He was a man of logic and reason, a product of the industrial age who viewed the world through the precise lens of his theodolite. He scoffed at the local tales of a weeping ghost and the warnings of the fishermen not to work upon the cliffs after sunset. He considered such beliefs to be the pitiable superstitions of an uneducated populace. On the third day of his work, a thick, unseasonable fog rolled in from the sea, reducing visibility to mere feet. Annoyed but determined, Finch pressed on, his calculations and measurements a shield against the encroaching gloom. As the light failed completely, he became disoriented. The familiar shapes of the rocks blurred into monstrous forms, and the sound of the waves below seemed to transform into a low, mournful moan. It was then that he saw her. Standing at the very precipice of the cliff was the silhouette of a woman, her form indistinct against the swirling gray. Believing her to be a local in distress, he called out. She did not turn. He took a step closer, his voice laced with the impatience of a man of authority. "Madam," he began, "you are in a most precarious position. Allow me to guide you back to the path." Still, she did not move, her gaze fixed upon the invisible horizon. A strange coldness, far colder than the damp sea air, began to seep into Finch's bones. He felt a sudden, inexplicable wave of grief wash over him, a phantom memory of a loss he had never experienced. He thought of his own fiancée, safe in London, and was seized by a terrifying, irrational certainty that he would never see her again. The feeling was so powerful it brought him to his knees. When he looked up, the figure was gone. He was found the next morning by a search party, huddled against a rock, his hair flecked with frost and his survey notes scattered and soaked with sea spray. He could not speak of what he had seen, but a profound and unshakable melancholy clung to him for the rest of his days, a man of numbers haunted by an emotion he could never quantify. The cliffs had left their mark upon his soul. The Maiden of Pendeen serves as a powerful environmental metaphor. She is the human face of a perilous landscape, a personification of the sea's dual nature as both giver and taker of life. In a pre-industrial world, where communities were utterly dependent on the ocean, such a figure was a psychological necessity. She validated the community's collective anxiety and grief, giving it a focal point. Her eternal vigil mirrors the real-life vigils of countless women who waited for ships that never returned. She is not a monster to be feared, but a symbol of communal trauma. Her presence reminds us that some landscapes are saturated with human emotion, that the earth itself can bear witness to our suffering and hold its memory long after we are gone. She represents the idea that powerful feelings, especially grief, can achieve a form of permanence, becoming as much a part of the world as the rocks and the waves. In the modern era, the tale of the Maiden of Pendeen endures. While the fishing fleets are smaller and technology has made the sea somewhat safer, the legend persists. Hikers walking the southwest coast path often report sudden, inexplicable feelings of sadness and despair in the area, particularly as fog descends. Photographs taken near Pendine Watch are sometimes found to contain strange, ethereal shapes in the mist that were not visible to the naked eye. The maiden has become a guardian of memory, a spectral link to a harsher past. She serves as a cautionary figure not against any supernatural evil, but against the hubris of forgetting the raw power of nature and the deep human cost of our relationship with it. Her endless watch is a silent, sorrowful protest against the indifference of the cosmos. She is the ghost of every unanswered prayer, the embodiment of every vigil kept in vain. To encounter her is to be confronted with the stark reality that love, however powerful, is not always enough to conquer the vast, unfeeling machinery of the world. And so she waits, a monument of grief carved from mist and memory, forever gazing out upon the gray, unforgiving waves. Our second journey takes us north, into the heart of Scotland, to the foreboding stone walls of Glamis Castle, a place steeped in blood, secrets, and royal intrigue. Here, among the myriad spirits said to haunt its corridors, we find one of the most famous crying maidens in the British Isles, the Grey Lady of Glamis, the restless spirit of Lady Janet Douglas. Unlike the anonymous maiden of Pendine, the Grey Lady is a ghost with a well-documented history, a victim of political machinations and royal cruelty whose tragedy was so profound it has stained the very fabric of the castle for nearly 500 years. Lady Janet Douglas is most often seen in the family chapel, where she prays silently or drifting as a luminous, gray pillar of light down the corridor above the clock tower. She is described as a figure of noble bearing, beautiful, but with a face etched with an unutterable sadness. Her form is often translucent, a shimmering haze of gray smoke that coalesces into the shape of a woman in Tudor-era dress. Her supernatural influence is one of intense sorrow and a palpable sense of injustice. Witnesses who see her are often overcome with a feeling of deep sympathy and pity. The air around her grows cold, and a scent, described variously as that of wood smoke or burnt roses, is said to hang in the air long after she has vanished. She is a passive spirit, never interacting with the living, forever trapped in a loop of her final moments of piety and her unjust demise. Her origin is a dark chapter in Scottish history. Lady Janet Douglas, Lady Glamis, was a woman of high birth and unimpeachable character, known for her beauty and her piety. However, she was a member of the powerful Douglas clan, whom King James V of Scotland despised with a pathological hatred. Seeking to destroy the Douglases, the king leveled false charges of witchcraft and treason against Lady Janet, accusing her of plotting to poison him. Despite a complete lack of evidence and the testimony of many who spoke to her good character, she was condemned in a sham trial. Her true crime was simply her name. On July 17, 1537, Lady Janet Douglas was taken to Castle Hill in Edinburgh and publicly burned at the stake. It was a horrific spectacle, and it was said she faced her agonizing death with extraordinary courage and dignity, praying for the soul of the king who had so cruelly wronged her. Her young son was forced to watch his mother's immolation. It is this profound injustice, this horrific end to a virtuous life, that is believed to have bound her spirit to the earthly plane. She does not haunt the place of her execution, but her beloved family home, Glamis Castle, the place that was unjustly stripped from her and her family. Her spirit seeks not vengeance, but the peace and sanctity of the home she was torn from. In the late 19th century, a group of fashionable socialites were staying at Glamis as guests of the Earl of Strathmore. Among them was a young woman, Eleanor Vance, known for her modern, skeptical views and her rather cynical wit. She had heard the tales of the Grey Lady and declared them to be nothing more than morbid fancy, a story told to frighten children and impress credulous tourists. One evening, after a lengthy dinner, She made a wager with the other guests that she would spend an hour alone in the supposedly haunted chapel at midnight, armed with nothing but a single candle and a book of poetry. Despite the host's unease, she could not be dissuaded. Eleanor entered the cold, stone chapel, the heavy oak door closing behind her with a sound that echoed in the profound silence. She sat in one of the ancient pews, the candlelight casting long, dancing shadows upon the walls. For the first half-hour, nothing happened. She read her poetry, a faint, mocking smile upon her lips. Then she felt it, a sudden, piercing cold that had nothing to do with the night air. The flame of her candle shrank to a tiny blue bead, and the air grew thick with the faint, acrid smell of smoke. She looked up towards the altar and saw a shimmering, gray light beginning to coalesce. It slowly took the form of a woman, her hands clasped as if in prayer, her face a mask of serene agony. Eleanor's skepticism evaporated in a wave of ice-cold terror. But it was not just fear she felt. She was flooded with an overwhelming sense of pity, a soul-crushing sorrow for this spectral woman and the terrible injustice she had suffered. It was as if the ghost's centuries of grief were being poured directly into her own heart. She could not scream. She could only weep, her own tears mingling with the phantom sorrow of the Gray Lady. When the chapel door was opened an hour later, the guests found Eleanor Vance huddled in the pew, her candle extinguished, weeping uncontrollably. She left the castle the next morning and was said to have been a more somber, compassionate woman for the rest of her life, forever changed by her brief, silent communion with a soul in eternal torment. The Gray Lady of Glamis represents the haunting power of historical trauma and the persistence of personal identity after death. Unlike the elemental maiden of Pendeen, Lady Janet is a specific individual whose story serves as a potent symbol of injustice. She embodies the idea that a sufficiently strong will, forged in the crucible of a wrongful death, can leave an indelible psychic imprint upon a place. Her haunting is a silent, eternal protest. She is a reminder that the crimes of the powerful are not easily erased by time, that the suffering of the innocent can echo for centuries. Psychologically, she represents our deep-seated fear of being punished for who we are, rather than what we have done. Her story taps into the primal terror of being helpless in the face of absolute, irrational authority. Her ghost is a monument to the endurance of the human spirit, a testament to the fact that even in death, a person's story can continue to be told, demanding to be heard. The legend of the Gray Lady remains one of the most active and frequently reported hauntings in Great Britain. Staff and visitors to Glamis Castle continue to report seeing her ethereal form in the chapel and the clock tower corridor. There is even a seat in the chapel that is permanently reserved for her, which no one is permitted to sit in. This tradition is a fascinating example of how the living adapt to and accommodate the dead, incorporating the ghost into the daily life of the castle. She has become more than a ghost. She is a permanent, if spectral, resident. Her story serves as a powerful connection to the castle's turbulent past, ensuring that the injustice done to Lady Janet Douglas is never forgotten. Her quiet, sorrowful presence is a far more powerful indictment of her murderer than any vengeful curse could ever be. She does not seek to harm, only to exist in the place she called home. Her eternal, silent prayer a constant reminder of a king's cruelty and a good woman's tragic end. She is the quiet conscience of the castle, a whisper of history that refuses to be silenced. We now travel west, across the Irish Sea, to the emerald fields and ancient ring forts of Ireland, the homeland of perhaps the most famous and feared of all crying maidens, the Banshee. The Bean Sidhe, meaning woman of the fairy mound, is not the ghost of a mortal woman in the conventional sense. She is a supernatural being, a fey spirit attached to certain ancient Irish families. Her cry, a heart-rending wail of pure grief, is not a threat but a harbinger, a terrible omen that foretells the imminent death of a member of that family. To hear her is to know that death is at the door. The Banshee's appearance varies wildly in folklore. Sometimes she is a beautiful young woman with long, silver hair, wearing a gray cloak over a green dress, her eyes red from weeping. In other tales, she is a terrifying, stooped old crone with a ravaged face, long, dirty fingernails, and a malevolent grin that belies the sorrow of her cry. She may also appear as a washerwoman, the Bean-Nye, seen washing the blood-stained clothes of the one who is about to die. Her primary supernatural ability is her voice. The cry, or keening, is said to be an unearthly sound, a blend of the wails of a grieving woman, the howl of a wolf, and the cry of a wild goose. It could be a low, mournful sob heard from a distance, or a window-shattering shriek if heard up close. To hear it is a terrifying and deeply sorrowful experience, an auditory premonition of the grief that is to come. The origin of the banshee is tied to the ancient Irish reverence for tradition and lineage. In Old Ireland, at the funeral of a chieftain or king, a woman would be employed to keen, to sing a lament for the dead. It is believed that the most powerful of these keeners, particularly those from fey-blooded families, became the first banshees, their connection to a particular bloodline so strong that it transcended death itself. They became spiritual guardians, or perhaps more accurately, spiritual heralds for their families, their final duty to announce the passing of one of their own from the mortal world to the next. This fey connection is crucial. The banshee is a creature of the otherworld, a being that walks the liminal spaces between life and death, civilization and the wild. In the early 20th century, during the tumultuous years of the Irish War of Independence, the O'Neill family, a once great lineage whose fortunes had long since faded, lived in a crumbling ancestral home in County Cork. The eldest son, Liam O'Neill, had left for Dublin to study medicine, embracing the modern world and rejecting what he called the folkloric baggage of his rural upbringing. He was a man of science, who believed only in what could be seen and measured. His elderly grandmother, however, still held to the old ways, and she would often tell him that the cry of their family's banshee had not been heard for 2 generations, a sign, she said, of their family's decline. Liam would simply laugh. One night in the winter of 1920, Liam was working late in his small Dublin apartment, studying by the light of a gas lamp. The city was under a strict curfew, and the streets outside were unnaturally silent. Suddenly, a sound pierced the stillness. It was a high, thin wail that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was a sound of such profound, unadulterated grief that it made the hair on his arms stand up. He rushed to the window, but the street was empty. The cry came again, closer this time, and it seemed to call his name on the wind. It was not a human sound. It was the sound of a heart breaking for all eternity. All his scientific rationalism fell away, and in its place was a cold, primal fear. He knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, what he was hearing. It was the O'Neill banshee. 2 days later, the telegram arrived. His younger brother, a passionate idealist who had secretly joined the Irish Republican Army, had been killed in an ambush in the countryside. The banshee had not been crying for a death in the past. She had been crying for a death that was happening at that very moment, hundreds of miles away. Liam never again scoffed at the old ways. The banshee is a fascinating psychological and sociological artifact. She represents the personification of familial grief and the deep-seated Irish cultural connection to ancestry and death. In a society structured around clans and bloodlines, the idea of a spiritual entity tied to your specific family provides a strange sort of comfort, even in its terror. It implies that your lineage is significant, that it is noticed by the other world. The banshee's cry, while an omen of death, is also a mark of distinction. It is a lament, not a threat. She weeps for the family, not at them. She is the ultimate expression of communal grief, her sorrow a prelude to the family's own. Sociologically, she reinforced the importance of blood ties and heritage. Psychologically, she is a manifestation of premonition, the human intuition that something is wrong, given a terrifying and unforgettable voice. She is the sound of the thread of life being cut. While belief in the banshee has waned in the modern, globalized Ireland, stories of her cry are still told, particularly in rural communities. She has been transformed in popular culture into a more generic, often malevolent, shrieking spirit, losing much of her original nuance as a sorrowful herald. However, some families still quietly claim their connection to a banshee. The legend speaks to a persistent cultural anxiety about the dissolution of the old family structures and a longing for a connection to a more mythic past. The banshee endures because she represents a fundamental human truth, that the deepest bonds of love and family are intertwined with the inevitability of grief. The cry of the banshee is the sound of the other world intruding upon our own. It is a reminder that despite our modern certainties, there are older, wilder forces at play, and that the ties of blood are bound by mysteries deeper than we can possibly comprehend. She is the lonely voice of death itself, weeping in advance for all the sorrows yet to come. From Ireland, we cross the water again, this time to Wales, a land of mountains, myths, and a language as ancient as the hills. Here we encounter a being who is in many ways the Welsh cousin to the banshee, but a far more grotesque and terrifying figure, the Gratchel Ribbon, or the Witch of the Mists. Where the banshee can be beautiful, the Gratch is always hideous. Where the banshee's cry is one of pure sorrow, the Gratch's is a sound of mingled grief and malice. She is a creature of the dark, wet places of the Welsh countryside, the marshes, the lonely crossroads, and the riverbanks shrouded in fog. The Gratch Ribbon is described as a horrifyingly ugly crone, with a deathly pale or greenish-black complexion, tangled, filthy hair, long, sinewy arms that end in hooked claws, and leathery, bat-like wings. Her teeth are black and jagged, and her eyes are said to glow with a faint, malevolent red light. Like the banshee, her primary manifestation is auditory. She emits a dreadful, screeching cry, often accompanied by the sound of her leathery wings flapping. Her cry is a prophecy of death, but is often more personal and immediate than the banshees. She is sometimes said to call out the name of the person who is about to die in a drawn-out, horrifying shriek. To see her is considered an infallible omen of one's own imminent demise. Her origins are shrouded in Welsh folklore, but she is often considered to be a degraded form of an ancient Welsh goddess or spirit of the land, perhaps a guardian of the underworld. Her name itself, Witch of the Mists, links her intrinsically to the landscape, particularly to the disorienting and dangerous fogs that can descend upon the Welsh mountains and valleys without warning. She is a personification of the dangers that lurk in the unseen, a manifestation of the fear of being lost and alone in a hostile environment. Her transformation from a potential goddess figure into a monstrous hag reflects a common pattern in folklore, where the old deities of a conquered people are demonized by the new prevailing culture. In the mid-19th century, during the height of the coal mining boom in the South Wales valleys, there was a mine owner named Rhys Pritchard. He was a hard, unforgiving man who had made his fortune by cutting corners on safety and working his men to the bone. The mine, known as Cumdu or Black Valley, was notoriously dangerous, its tunnels prone to flooding and collapse. The miners, steeped in the old traditions, whispered of strange sounds heard deep within the earth, and some claimed to have seen a shadowy, winged shape near the mine's entrance at dusk. They spoke of the Gratchel Ribbon, saying she was warning them that the mountain was angry. Pritchard, a man who worshipped only profit, publicly mocked their superstitions. One evening, as the night shift was preparing to descend, a thick, cold mist rolled down the valley, swallowing the pit head in a damp, gray shroud. A terrible, screeching wail echoed from the darkness, a sound that chilled the blood of even the most hardened miners. It was a cry of despair and fury, and it seemed to claw at the air. Several men refused to go down, their faces pale with terror. Pritchard, enraged by the delay, stormed out of his office. "Get back to work, you cowardly fools," he bellowed. "It is nothing but the wind in the cables." As he spoke, a figure materialized from the mist before him. It was a gaunt, hideous woman with tangled hair and wings like a bat. She pointed a long, bony finger at Pritchard and let out a shriek that seemed to drill into his skull. In that shriek, he heard his own name, RHYS. The apparition then dissolved back into the fog. Shaken, but unwilling to lose face, Pritchard grabbed a lantern and declared he would lead the shift himself. He was the first one into the cage. An hour later, the main tunnel collapsed, flooding with water from an underground river. None of the men on the night shift, including Reese Pritchard, were ever seen again. The Gratchwa ribbon had given her warning, and it had been ignored. The Gratchwa ribbon functions as a powerful symbol of nature's wrath and a guardian of the sacredness of the land. In the context of industrial-era Wales, her legend took on new significance. She became the avenging spirit of a landscape being violently wounded by mining and quarrying. Her ugliness reflects the ugliness of the slag heaps and polluted rivers that were scarring the beautiful Welsh valleys. She is the land's pain and anger given a monstrous form and a terrifying voice. Psychologically, she embodies the concept of repressed knowledge or instinct. The miners, with their deep connection to the earth, could sense the instability of the mine. They felt the anger of the mountain. The Gratch is the personification of that intuitive warning, a primal scream from the subconscious that the rational, profit-driven mind of a man like Pritchard chooses to ignore to his ultimate peril. While less spoken of today, the tale of the Gratchwa ribbon still surfaces in rural Wales. She is sometimes blamed for the strange cries heard on the mountains at night, or for the sudden, disorienting mist that can lead hikers astray. Her story has become an ecological fable, a cautionary tale about the consequences of disrespecting the natural world. She reminds us that the earth is not a passive resource to be endlessly exploited, but a powerful entity with its own limits and its own capacity for a terrible, screeching form of justice. The Gratch ribbon is the grotesque shadow of the banshee, a dark mirror reflecting not sorrow, but a furious, vengeful grief. She is the scream of the violated earth, a chilling prophecy that those who refuse to listen to the warnings of the wild will ultimately be consumed by it. Her cry is a curse, and her appearance is a death sentence delivered by the land itself. We now return to England, to the bleak and beautiful expanse of Dartmoor in Devon, a landscape of granite tors, treacherous mires, and sudden, blinding fogs. Here we find the tale of the White Lady of Oakhampton Castle, a spirit bound not by a single moment of grief, but by an eternal, repetitive penance. Her legend is a chilling exploration of cruelty, avarice, and a punishment that fits the crime with a terrifying, cosmic precision. Her name, in life, was Lady Howard. The spirit of Lady Howard is said to manifest as a skeletal figure, sometimes clothed in a fine white dress, riding in a carriage made of the bones of her former husbands. The carriage is pulled by 4 headless black horses and is driven by a headless coachman. A single, spectral black hound with glowing red eyes is said to run alongside it. This ghastly procession is said to travel from the ruins of her former home at Fitzford Gate in Tavistock to the crumbling walls of Oakhampton Castle. Her supernatural task is relentless and eternal. Every night, she must make this journey, and upon arriving at the castle, she must pluck a single blade of grass from the bailey. Only when the entire castle mound is bare of all grass will her penance be complete, an impossible, Sisyphean task designed to last for all eternity. The origin of this haunting lies in the life of the historical Lady Howard, a 17th-century heiress who, through a series of 4 marriages, accumulated a vast fortune and a great deal of land. Folklore, however, has transformed this shrewd and powerful woman into a monstrous figure, a Bluebeard-like villainess who murdered her husbands to gain their wealth. It is for these supposed crimes of greed and cruelty that her spirit is condemned. The carriage of bones represents her victims, forever bound to her in death as they were in life. The single blade of grass is a symbol of the futility of her task. For every blade she plucks, 100 more will grow. Her penance is not to achieve a goal, but to be forever trapped in the striving for it. In the early 18th century, a young, arrogant squire named Thomas Drake, who prided himself on his fine horses and his fearlessness, made a drunken boast in a Tavistock tavern. He claimed he would ride out on the old Oakhampton Road at midnight and race the spectral carriage of Lady Howard. The old locals in the tavern warned him against such folly, telling him that to even witness the procession was to risk one's life, and to interfere with it was to invite damnation. Drake, full of brandy and bravado, laughed at their fears and accepted the wager. He mounted his prized black stallion and rode out into the moonless night, positioning himself at a crossroads said to be on the Phantom's route. As a local church bell tolled midnight, a deathly chill fell upon the air. Drake heard the distant sound of rattling bones and the thundering of hooves that made no sound upon the dirt road. From the darkness, the terrible carriage emerged, glowing with a faint, phosphorescent light. He saw the skeletal driver, the headless horses, and within the carriage, the pale, luminous form of Lady Howard, her face a mask of eternal, joyless labor. Beside the carriage ran the great black hound, its eyes burning like coals. Instead of fear, a reckless excitement seized Drake. He spurred his horse forward, yelling a challenge as he galloped alongside the ghastly coach. For a moment, he seemed to keep pace. But then the spectral hound turned its head, its fiery eyes fixing upon him. It let out a howl that was not a sound, but a feeling of pure terror that struck Drake's heart like a physical blow. His stallion screamed in fright, reared up, and threw him to the ground. The last thing he saw was the bone carriage passing by, not even slowing, its passenger oblivious to him, her focus only on her eternal, pointless task. Thomas Drake was found the next morning, his mind shattered. He lived for another 30 years, but he never spoke another coherent word, spending his days plucking at blades of grass in the asylum gardens, his own mind trapped in a futile, repetitive loop, a chilling echo of the spectral punishment he had so arrogantly challenged. The legend of Lady Howard is a powerful allegory for greed and the concept of cosmic justice. Her eternal task is a brilliant metaphor for the insatiable nature of avarice. Just as she can never strip the castle bare of grass, the greedy person can never acquire enough wealth to be satisfied. There is always more to be had, another blade of grass to pluck. Her punishment is not a fiery hell, but an endless, meaningless repetition of the very desire that damned her. Psychologically, she represents the fear of a wasted life, of being trapped in a cycle of empty acquisition with no hope of fulfillment. Her story served as a potent social control mechanism, a cautionary tale warning against the dangers of ambition, particularly for women in a patriarchal society where a powerful, wealthy woman like the historical Lady Howard could be seen as a threatening, transgressive figure. The tale remains a cornerstone of Dartmoor folklore. The ruins of Oakhampton Castle still draw visitors, many of whom hope, or fear, to catch a glimpse of the phantom carriage. The story's endurance speaks to its powerful symbolism. In an age of consumerism and endless economic growth, the image of a soul condemned to a futile, eternal task of accumulation feels more relevant than ever. Lady Howard is the ghost of capitalism's shadow self, the spirit of more trapped in a loop of never enough. Her sorrow is not the gentle melancholy of a lost love, but the cold, arid despair of a soul that has gained the whole world only to be condemned to count its blades of grass for eternity. She is a chilling reminder that the most terrible prisons are not made of stone, but of the desires that we can never, ever satisfy. For our final legend, we travel to the remote northern isles of Orkney and Shetland, where the line between the land and the sea is blurred, and the folklore is infused with the cold, mystical spirit of the North Atlantic. Here we find the story of the Selkie, a creature that is not a ghost, but a being of a different order, whose story is perhaps the most profound and tragic tale of longing in all of British folklore. The Selkie is a seal in the water, but can shed her skin on land to become a breathtakingly beautiful human. In their human form, Selkies are described as being almost supernaturally beautiful, with dark, soulful eyes that seem to hold the depths of the ocean within them. They are gentle, graceful, and possess a quiet, otherworldly sadness. Their power lies in their transformative nature, their ability to bridge the two worlds of sea and land. However, this is also their greatest vulnerability. If a mortal man finds a Selkie's discarded sealskin, he can hide it from her, preventing her from returning to the sea. She is then bound to him and can be forced to become his wife. While she may be a dutiful and loving wife and mother, her heart will always yearn for the ocean, her true home. Her defining characteristic is this profound, incurable longing, a constant, sorrowful gaze directed towards the waves. The origin of the Selkie myth is deeply rooted in the culture of island communities whose lives were inextricably linked with the sea and its seal populations. Seals, with their large, dark, seemingly human-like eyes, were often viewed with a mixture of awe and suspicion. The myth may have arisen to explain mysterious drownings, or the appearance of beautiful, unknown women who were washed ashore after shipwrecks. It speaks to a profound understanding of the natural world as a place of mystery and enchantment, and of the sea as a separate kingdom with its own people and its own laws. The Selkie is the ultimate embodiment of the wild, untamable spirit of the ocean. There is a tale told on the Isle of Unst of a fisherman named Magnus, a lonely man who lived in a small croft by the sea. One night, under the light of a full moon, he saw a group of Selkies dancing on the shore, their sealskins lying on the rocks beside them. He was captivated by the beauty of one of them, a maiden named Mara. Quietly, he crept forward and stole her skin, hiding it beneath the hearthstone of his cottage. When the other Selkies returned to the sea, Mara was trapped. Magnus promised to be a kind husband, and though her heart was breaking, she had no choice but to go with him. For 7 years, she lived as his wife. She gave him 2 children, a boy and a girl, and she cared for them with a deep and tender love. But every day, a part of her was dying. The smell of the salt on the wind was a torment, and the sound of the waves was a constant, mournful song calling her home. Magnus loved her deeply, but in a possessive, human way. He could not understand the depth of her sorrow, mistaking her melancholy for simple sadness. One day, while Magnus was out fishing, her young daughter, playing by the hearth, discovered the hidden sealskin. The child, not knowing what it was but sensing its importance to her mother, brought it to her. Mara took the skin, her hands trembling. She hugged her children, tears streaming down her face, a look of love and agony in her eyes. She then ran from the cottage down to the sea, pulled the skin over her body, and plunged into the waves, transforming back into a seal. When Magnus returned, he found his children weeping on the shore. He never saw his human wife again, but it is said that a large, sad-eyed seal was often seen swimming near his cottage, forever watching the children she had been forced to leave behind. The Selkie legend is one of the most psychologically and sociologically rich in all of folklore. It is a powerful metaphor for a mismatched marriage, for the loss of identity within a restrictive domestic role, and for the experience of exile. The Selkie bride represents anyone who feels trapped in a life that is not their own, forced to suppress their true nature to conform to the expectations of others. Her story is a poignant exploration of the conflict between duty and personal freedom, between love for her human family and the primal, undeniable call of her own soul. From a modern, eco-critical perspective, the Selkie represents the wild, natural world captured and domesticated by humanity. The theft of her skin is a symbolic act of conquest and control over nature, and her ultimate escape is a reminder that the wild can never be truly, permanently tamed. The story of the Selkie continues to resonate powerfully today, inspiring countless books, songs, and films. It speaks to a modern sense of alienation and a longing for a deeper connection to the natural world. In an age of environmental crisis, the image of the Selkie, torn between the human world and her dying ocean home, takes on a new and tragic urgency. She is a symbol of all that we stand to lose if we continue to treat the wild as something to be possessed rather than respected. The sorrow of the Selkie is the sorrow of exile, the quiet, constant ache of a heart that is not at home. Her tale is a timeless and heartbreaking reminder that true love cannot be built upon captivity, and that the wildest parts of the soul, like the sea itself, must ultimately be free. And so, our journey through the whispering moors and along the weeping shores draws to its close. We have stood on the cliffs of Cornwall with the Maiden of Pendeen, a being of composite grief. We have walked the haunted corridors of Glamis with the Grey Lady, a victim of historical injustice. We have listened to the fatalistic cry of the Irish banshee and the furious shriek of the Welsh Grachwy ribbon. We have witnessed the eternal penance of Lady Howard on the lonely roads of Dartmoor, and we have felt the profound, exilic sorrow of the Celtic bride in the Northern Isles. What wisdom, then, have we gleaned from these sorrowful shades? What truth is encoded in their endless weeping and their eternal vigils? It seems to me that these legends, in all their varied forms, converge upon a single, powerful theme: the immense, world-altering power of profound human emotion. They teach us that grief, injustice, and longing are not fleeting, ephemeral things. They are forces of nature in their own right, capable of staining a landscape, defying time, and etching a story into the very fabric of reality. These crying maidens are not merely ghosts. They are emotional landmarks, monuments to feelings so powerful they refuse to die. They reveal a truth about our relationship with the world around us. They suggest that the barrier between our internal, psychological landscape and the external, physical one is far more permeable than our modern, rationalist worldview would have us believe. The moor is not just a collection of rock and heather. It is a repository of memory and sorrow. The castle is not just stone and mortar. It is a vessel for history's unquiet conscience. These legends restore a sense of sacredness and mystery to the world, reminding us that we are not separate from our environment, but deeply, inextricably woven into it, and that our actions and our emotions have consequences that can echo for centuries. If our explorations tonight have stirred something within you, I urge you to help us preserve these vital stories. The act of watching, of listening, and of sharing is to become a keeper of this ancient wisdom, a guardian against the gray amnesia of the modern world. Subscribe to our channel, share these stories with those who would understand, and continue the conversation in the comments below. By doing so, you become part of a tradition as old as the first campfire, the tradition of passing on the tales that tell us who we are. The world is full of such stories, of whispers on the wind and shadows at the edge of sight. The legends are not dead. They are merely sleeping, waiting for new voices to tell them and new ears to hear them. And I shall remain your faithful guide in these future explorations, for there are always more shadows to plumb and more truths to be found within the dark. Remember that the best monsters and the most poignant ghosts are always the ones that show us something true about ourselves. May your nights be free from malevolent spirits, but may your dreams be haunted by the profound truths that their sorrows have to teach. May you walk through the world with an awareness of the stories that lie sleeping beneath your feet, and may you always have the wisdom to listen when the wind begins to whisper.